ultimately, what all we're talking about here, like everything we're going to discuss today, Jesse, is about what makes you happy. It's about your happiness. And we started out by saying if having energy and not being sick and being healthy and being vibrant, if that makes you happy, I know how to do that.
Really looking forward to this. And the new book is great, 2 meals a day. And I read in there that you almost called this the 1.5 diet. So
Yeah.
Talk about what that means.
Well, I'm coming at this after several decades of research into how we can optimize our health through diet and exercise and all these other, methodologies and things that we do in our lives to improve our health and to lose weight and to have more energy. And one of the aha moments I had was this notion that we eat way too much food, that there's just way too much consumption. And we sort of assume that 3 meals a day plus a snack plus an evening thing, is the way that our bodies are set up to receive energy. And the fact is, we don't need to eat as much food as we think we do. And for the most part, most of us eat far too much food, far more than we require to thrive. So, my iterations went from the paleo diet, which was basically based on eating real food, to a keto diet, which was basically centered around achieving metabolic flexibility through using ketogenic means and improving our fat burning capability and reducing our dependence on carbohydrate. And then it got to this point where, like, wait a minute, so much of what happens to the body that's good happens when we're not eating. So why is it that every time we eat, the body's sort of reparative, restorative mechanisms shut down? Maybe we're better off eating less frequently and compressing that eating window. We call it intermittent fasting these days, but compressing that eating window. I do so well quite often on 1 meal a day. I thought, well, that's a bit much to ask for most people. So let's call it 1.5 meals a day, right? 1.5 a day. And then my editors and my co-author Brad Kern said, we better start with 2, and that'll be the title of the book, 2 meals a day. And then sort of inside the book, we'll give you that one added secret that maybe 1.5 meals a day is the ideal consumption pattern. So that's kind of how it came about.
Got it. And when it comes to 2 meals a day, is this something that everybody can embrace or just certain groups?
No, I think it's something that everybody can embrace. Over the years, as we've again looked into different eating patterns, different ways of eating, looked at intermittent fasting, for example, as a means of achieving metabolic flexibility. There's been sort of this little eyebrow raising. Well, it's not for everybody, and particularly women have their particular issues with hormonal responses to food and timing and things like that. But I do feel like everyone has the potential to get to this compressed eating window. Now, whether it's 2 meals that start with traditional breakfast, morning meal and a noon meal and then stopping, or whether it's a noon meal and an evening meal and then stopping, I think everybody has the potential to get to that point. A lot of people, come to this from having been, severely metabolically deranged, if you will, metabolically damaged through food choices they've made their entire lives. So it's not like we can, overcome this or counteract this or fix this in a few short weeks with some people. Some people adapt very quickly, and some people, can get into this way of eating, this mindset, this compressed eating window, this 2 meals a day, very comfortably in a week or 2. Others, it takes a little bit longer. But I do think, to your point, or to answer the question, it's available to everyone to get down to this sort of 2 meals a day concept.
And depending on where somebody's at, let's talk about how they start to dip their toe into the water and take this on. Starting with somebody who maybe is eating more of a typical diet, high in carbohydrates. What would that look like for them to progress to this point? So they're going to do it in a form that's going to be as gentle on them and set them up for success.
For sure. Well, I mean, I think we start certainly by eliminating the big 3. The big 3 would be the sugars, the added sugars, the added sweeteners, the pies, the cakes, the candies, the desserts, things like that I think most people are pretty aware that they ought to be cutting back on, that tend to be problematic. So sugars, processed grains, and in many cases whole grains as well. So this would be bread, pasta, cereal, things that are made with grains that convert to sugar, glucose in the body pretty quickly. So cutting way back on those. And then ultimately getting rid of the industrial seed oils, these processed oils like canola, corn oil, soybean oil, which are showing now in the research to be more and more problematic for people. It may be that these industrial seed oils are actually more problematic than, say, sugar for most people. So by cutting back on those, eliminating, if you can, those, and coming down to a list of real foods, this would be meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables, a little bit of fruit, a natural food-based diet, a natural food-based way of eating. That's sort of phase one, and that was my original Primal Blueprint. That was my original paleo version of how we could clean up our diets. When you do that, when you get rid of those big three, and you come down to this pretty impressive list of very delicious, tasty, satisfying foods, you're probably 80% of the way there, and your body starts to understand that it's going to derive energy from high nutrient density foods that also contain, again, a lot of micronutrients, all the fat and protein, the healthy fats that you need, and with that shift in diet, we start to lose the cravings and the hunger and the appetite that drive our lives from one meal to the next, from one day to the next. And that frees us up to start to think in terms of, how hungry am I really right now? And am I really hungry? Am I really craving something? Am I really starving? Or is that just, my brain that had been so used to a bagel at 10 a.m. in the morning and a cup of coffee, or starting the day out with a bowl of cereal and some toast? Or is it the fact that I'm so tied to mealtime that my brain is now thinking, well, it's noon, I must be hungry. And getting away from that sort of habituated tether to things that we're largely addicted to in the way of carbohydrates, or tethered to mealtime, which is more of a habit than anything else, and becoming intuitive about our hunger. Am I really hungry? Am I really feeling tired and like I have low energy and therefore I need to eat? So these are some of the skills that we talk about in the book, how once you've cleaned your diet up, then you can start to identify what is really hunger, what is really an energy requirement. And so one of the many strategies we might use is, you wake up in the morning and you say to yourself, do I really need to eat something immediately upon getting out of bed? Because if you've done this appropriately, the body has already set up these systems that start to give you energy from your own stored body fat in the morning. And it's incredible the amount of energy that we have access to on all of our bodies. It's incredible the amount of energy that can be generated by your own stored body fat, and the fact that you do not have to eat. So, it's a bit of a leap of faith for some people to say, well, I wake up in the morning and I've always been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And now Mark's telling me, go as long as you can without eating. Don't starve. Don't force yourself to be miserable, but see how long you can go into the day without having to have that first meal. And the longer you can go, the better proof that is that you have become more metabolically flexible. And by metabolic flexibility, what I'm talking about is the body's ability to derive energy from a variety of energy substrates. So it could be the carbohydrate on your plate of food that converts to glucose. It could be the glucose already in your bloodstream. It could be the glycogen in your muscles that is a stored form of glucose in the muscles. It could be the fat that's on your plate of food. It could be the fat that's on your hips and thighs and belly. It could even be the ketones that your liver makes in the absence of carbohydrate. When you're metabolically flexible, you're able to derive energy from all these different energy substrates that are typically available to us if we have developed the machinery to burn it. The problem is most people go through their lives without really undertaking the effort to really create the body's need to build metabolic machinery to burn more fat, to make more mitochondria where the fat burns. To be unburdened of having to eat some form of carbohydrate every couple of hours to maintain blood sugar, because your brain is now so comfortable in utilizing the ketones that your liver makes in the absence of carbohydrate. Ultimately, it's the most empowering thing a person can do, I believe.
And what I'm hearing you saying here is the best place for a person to start would be to skip breakfast or push that breakfast back and narrow that eating window throughout the day. And what that's going to do over time is build the metabolic flexibility you're talking about here.
Exactly. So as we say, the science sort of shows that all the good stuff happens to the human body when we're not eating, right? All the repair happens, all of the building of, these new fat-burning enzyme systems and the metabolic machinery, the increase in mitochondria to utilize fat happen in the absence of insulin. So whenever we eat, our pancreas secretes insulin with the understanding that insulin's there to drive the storage of whatever those nutrients are that we just ate into the cells. And that's great. That's part of our survival mechanism over millions of years. But the problem is if we eat too much and we eat too frequently, and insulin is constantly driving the storage of these nutrients, we never get a chance to take those nutrients out of storage and burn them. So we're always filling the gas tank, but we're never burning off the gas. When we start to engage in a compressed eating window and allow maybe 16 or 18 hours of not eating throughout the day, that's when the insulin then drops, and that allows glucagon to rise, and that allows fat to come out of storage, and that allows all of these processes that I just described to start to take place, where we build more mitochondria, where the cells tend to engage in autophagy and literally start to consume the parts of themselves that have become damaged through excessive eating or through inflammation or oxidation, and the cells can repair themselves. And even it appears that there's some opportunity for damaged strands of DNA to self-repair during these periods of not eating. So it's a bit of a stretch for a lot of people to understand, but the truth is all the good things happen to us when we're not eating. And so to the extent that we can kind of impose that period of not eating onto our daily lives with ease and grace. I mean, I'm not trying to make this difficult for people. I want to have it be something that feels normal and natural and intuitive and and energetic and energizing. But that's what's going on.
So earlier you talked about the big three things we want to remove: the refined oils, the grains, and the sugars. Would you say that would be the first step? And then would the next step be to generally take our gross amount of carbs we're eating in a day and bring that down before we start compressing that eating window?
That's one way to do it. I mean, here's the thing. I'm no longer tied to keto as sort of the only way to do this, right? I used to think keto was, and it probably is still the best way. And a ketogenic diet is one where you reduce carbs significantly to, say, under 50 grams of carbs a day. Now, what that looks like in a healthy diet, you can still eat a good sized salad, a couple of helpings of steamed vegetables, and those are all sources of carbs. But those carbs are also kind of locked in a nice tight fibrous matrix, so they don't just flood into the gut, into the bloodstream as glucose. They sort of leach in over time in a way that's kind of a time release for carbs. But yeah, one way would be to say, okay, if I've gotten rid of the big three, but I'm still eating a lot of potatoes, sweet potatoes, starchy carbs, tubers, legumes, peas, things like that. Maybe the next step would be to cut those back and really start to see if I can stimulate this, not only the creation of more ketones, because in the absence of these carbs, the body says, well, we used to run on carbs. We've been running on carbs because that's how you've set the system up over the past several decades. Now you're withholding the carbs. So now there's this dearth of energy a little bit for the brain, but the brain loves ketones. So it just prompts the liver to make more ketones. And the ketones, in unburdening the brain of having to have more carbs, the brain becomes used to the ketones. The liver becomes used to pumping out the ketones. The brain builds the metabolic machinery to kind of utilize them very comfortably and conveniently. And all while this is happening, you're also improving your muscle's ability to derive most of its energy from fat. And in many or most cases, this is stored body fat. So it's what people want. People want to lose their stored body fat typically. So cutting the carbs is one strategy. Now, another strategy, which involves not even cutting the carbs so much, is just simply extending that window of not eating out just by using your perception of your energy levels and your hunger levels to say, you know what, I feel pretty good. I don't need to eat. Just because it's noon, I don't need to eat lunch yet. Or just because it's 9 a.m., I don't need to eat breakfast yet. And it's really allowing people to understand that, as I said, probably in the first part of this interview, we eat too much food. And luckily, many of us can get away with overeating food and not gaining too much weight. A lot of us can't get away with it. But even those of us who can get away with it doesn't mean that it's the ideal scenario. So, I did a sort of a thought experiment a bunch of years ago, and I said, people tend to, because we're wired to overeat, that's part of our genetic heritage. That's part of what enabled us to survive the rigors of a hostile environment for millions of years. We are wired to overeat, and then we're wired to convert the excess calories of what we overeat into stored energy that we carry conveniently around with us over our center of gravity on the belly and the hips and the thighs. We are wired to overeat, and many of us use this idea that, like, what's the most amount of food I can eat and get away with? What's the most amount of food I can eat and not gain weight? What's the most amount of this dessert I can have and not feel guilty or not feel uncomfortable later on? And it's an interesting, part of human nature to see what we can get away with, to play right up to the margins, up to the edges. Well, the converse of that would be to say, well, what's the least amount of food I can eat and still maintain muscle mass or build muscle, have all the energy I want, not get sick, and most importantly, not be hungry? What's the least amount of food I can consume and have all those benefits? And again, I'm going to stress this. The most important part of that statement is, and not get hungry, because hunger sort of derails everything, right? And what you find as you become metabolically flexible and you start to burn off more body fat and you start to be good at creating ketones and burning those ketones in the absence of glucose, you find that you need probably 30% fewer calories than you were eating beforehand. And, magically 30% less would be one less meal a day. So a lot of people would say, well, okay, I get that, 2 meals a day, Mark, but now instead of 3 meals of 800 calories each for a total of 2,400 calories, you mean 2 meals, Mark, that are 2 meals of 1,200 calories, right? Because I still need the 2,400 calories. And I'm saying, no, you don't. You literally are getting rid of 1 meal, and the other 2 meals are the same size that you would have been eating. And in many cases now you'll choose to make them even smaller. And you'll be amazed at how much energy you have, how much, how you don't get sick because your immune system optimizes, and how over time, you just you have this feeling of of lightness and energy and the ability to go through a day and never really have to focus on classic meal times. Like, I've got this project I'm working on, and well, we have to take a break at noon because I have to eat lunch. I can't not eat lunch. And those sorts of thoughts kind of disappear, and you go, wow. To me, this was huge because I was a big eater my whole life, and so I was one of those people who could get away with eating a lot of food. And when I discovered that I didn't need to eat that much food, it was transformative in a lot of ways. And one of those ways was sometimes I would be like, because typically I'll eat lunch at like 1:30, 2, and then it's a small lunch, and then I'll have what we would call a dinner at like 7:30. Well, quite often I'll find myself, it's 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm like, wow, I haven't eaten anything yet. I feel great. And now I feel like, okay, why don't I just extend this wonderful window of opportunity that my body has to repair itself and not eat until 7 o'clock and have one meal today. And so I've had, many days where I don't think in advance, well, I'm just going to only have one meal today. I have these days where I'm like, realize I haven't eaten yet, and I'm going to have one meal for dinner, and then I might do it again tomorrow because it felt so good. And it's important. It's just, I cannot stress enough how important it is to say that this isn't like it's a sacrifice. This isn't like I'm sitting here going, oh, geez, if I can only make it through the next 2 hours of misery, I'll be able to reward myself with a meal, with dinner. No, it's like, okay, I found this new amount of time that I can keep plowing through with my workload or my productivity or whatever it is I'm involved in, if it's even reading a book. And when it comes around to dinner time, I'll eat a meal, and my body will be not just no worse for having skipped the meal, it'll actually be better off for having skipped the meal. Now, do I do this every day? No, I like to eat. I do like to eat. So, but it's just this metabolic flexibility and this metabolic efficiency that I've developed that enables me to not even have to think about planning a day around mealtime or around refueling or any of these things that seem to run everyone else's lives.
Well, I'm sure that's hard for a lot of people to understand, even people that are eating a healthier diet but still consume a lot of carbs, trying to fathom what you described there, where you're forgetting almost to eat your meal. So I think the big thing for people to highlight here from what you said is that, take your time with this, experiment, work your way up, and listen to your body as you're going through. It's if you haven't been there, it can be hard to understand how somebody could feel the satiation that you're talking about.
Yeah, so people who have been eating a lot of carbs, they've really driven a different form of machinery that depends on carbs all the time. So it's really difficult for people who have become carb dependent to fathom the idea of skipping meals because their brain is so used to getting a new source of carbohydrate every couple of hours, a new source of glucose. Because for those people, they never really get to the point where they're good at burning fat, and they're never. So they don't become fat adapted, which is the term we use, and they also have an issue with using ketones. So the brain just hasn't really ever been exposed to ketones in the absence of glucose. So the first couple of days, the brain's going like, where's my glucose? Like, where's my glucose? And until you go through that process of withholding carbohydrates, the brain always wants to go back to its go-to source of fuel, which is glucose. And so that's where it becomes a little bit difficult to do this without reducing the carbs and without increasing the healthy fats and again certainly reducing the sugary carbs, because a lot of people, if you look at a typical American diet that's got pancakes or French toast or cereal or oatmeal, even steel cut, for breakfast, and a sandwich or pasta or whatever for lunch, and some chips and some fries, and maybe there was a bagel for a snack in the morning, and maybe dinner is again baked potato, more pasta, some legumes, especially if you're a vegetarian, and not a lot of fat, not a lot of meat. And that's a big load of carbohydrate. And yes, you can live on that. I mean, I was an endurance athlete for 20 years, and I thrived on 1,200 grams of carbs a day sometimes. I mean, I was like a carb machine, but I had to eat every couple of hours to keep my energy levels up, to keep my blood sugar levels up, because I never, excuse me, I had to eat every couple of hours throughout the day to keep my energy levels up, because I never really developed a true fat burning capability. Even though I was doing, marathons and triathlons, yeah, I was pretty good at burning fat, but I still needed to continually refuel with carbs because I had not built the enhanced metabolic machinery to become metabolically flexible, to derive most of my energy when I was racing from fats, and use the ketones to offset my brain's requirement for glucose.
So for me, the way I go about fasting is through the week. Typically I'll intermittent fast and skip breakfast and do sort of like you, but usually I'll eat around noon. And then on weekends, I'll have breakfast with the family. Either we'll make like a bigger breakfast at home, or usually on Sundays we'll go out for brunch. And it doesn't mean we're not eating healthy, but I'll allow myself to eat earlier on those days, including some healthy carbs, again, to maintain that metabolic flexibility, being able to switch over to carbs as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the definition of metabolic flexibility, is to be able to use whatever substrate is present at the time, in concert with what the workload requirement is at the time. So you're describing exactly what metabolic flexibility means. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on the measurements of blood glucose levels and ketone levels. At the end of the day, all that really matters is, how do you feel? And if you feel good doing that, then I'm not gonna put any sort of a correction into the way you're eating. It sounds like you're metabolically flexible. It sounds like, because metabolic flexibility basically, again, means that you have, throughout the day, you have steady levels of energy that could be derived from the high carb breakfast that you had, and now you're off doing some physical activity with your family, or it could be from the fat that's stored on your body because you didn't eat. But as long as you feel good, and as long as you're not in a funk, because I mean, here's where it really manifests itself for some people. Some people get so deep into keto and so into the concept of keto without building the metabolic flexibility, that if they go back and they get, out of ketosis, they get out of this point where they're generating tons of ketones, because they had a day where they had 200 grams of carbs, and then they complain of feeling horrible and feeling like crap and whatever. Well, that's not metabolic flexibility. That's basically somebody who is able to engage in a ketogenic way of eating and produce ketones, but maybe there's something we need to work on with their workout strategy, their exercise strategy, that isn't putting through, isn't exhausting the carbs, the glycogen stores in a way that when they refill them by having a day of excessive carbohydrates, it isn't an automatic bonus to everything else they're doing. When in fact what they're doing is they're still they're still keto, and they maybe have a lot of body fat that they're not able to pull the body fat out of storage because they've overeaten the carbs and they've turned off the ketogenic part of it, but they haven't done enough of the metabolic work in the gym to be able to burn the carbohydrates, the glycogen, efficiently, effectively, and quickly, and transition from one energy source to the other, which is what this flexibility is all about.
And Mark, personally, do you ever take a morning where you don't skip breakfast and maybe have a smoothie bowl or have something like a gluten-free pancake? Or do you ever have those, not a cheat day, but
no. You could,
is that ever fit into the week for you?
I'm not gonna say all the time. I was gonna say all the time. No, it's not all the time, but it does fit in. We live in, my wife and I live in Miami Beach, and there's a great place that serves brunch. And I literally will have the most decadent brioche French toast there, for example. In addition to an omelet or whatever I'm having and a cup of coffee. But I love it. It's just not something that I would that I would feel like doing every day. I literally, it's one of those treats that I like to kind of work my way up to it, but I don't refrain from having it on a day where we might be out with another couple, with some friends who are visiting, and say, let's just go do a nice brunch today. Because I'm metabolically flexible, I can have that French toast and not feel like crap later on. I mean, I might feel a little bit a little bit off because of the amount of sugar and maple syrup that might be on that. But it's I have to choose. Is it worth a slight amount of discomfort? I don't feel like I'm derailing my life goals by doing that. And in fact, I love to eat, and so I love to I want every bite of food I put in my mouth to taste great. And sometimes that means a treat. And I like to feel like, I deserve it. And it's not something that it could be very easy to do that every day, right? Every meal, every day. But I know where the line is. I know where the line is that I'm going to enjoy the experience in real time and then get back on the original plan. But that's what metabolic flexibility is all about. It's about feeling good, feeling energetic, maintaining muscle mass, maintaining energy, not getting sick, and not being hungry.
Got it. You mentioned Miami Beach there, and I think it was since last time we talked, you made a big move from Malibu to the other side of the U.S. in Florida. Now you're over in Miami Beach. So talk about what spurred that move, because that's not just, moving to another town or whatnot. You're making a big lifestyle shift with that. What spurred that on, and how has that transition been?
Well, so I was getting ready to sell my company, and I wanted to. I'm not retired necessarily per se, but I wanted to have a bit more of a feeling of retirement. I love warm weather. I love I love high humidity. I love warm water. I like beaches. I had in Malibu, I had beaches, and I had sand, and I had some warm weather, but not warm enough. And the water is always cold in Malibu. And I spend a lot of time in the water now. I'm either paddling or, stand up paddling, or I have a electric foil board that I use, and I love to ride a fat tire bike on the sand on the beach. I play ultimate frisbee with a bunch of people here in Miami Beach. So I wanted that feeling of a little bit of retirement. And then, then the truth is I got really sick and tired of the governance of California. I feel like it's a whole different political conversation, but I don't have the strong feelings, the warm feelings for California that I used to have. I think that between the taxes and the governance and how difficult the state has made it for businesses to operate, became a real issue for me, and I wanted to get away from that. So love the people, love the topography of California, but I'm really, really digging Miami Beach.
Well, I know one of the benefits you talk about in the book is that you and your wife Carrie are getting to walk about quite a bit more. It's an area that's set up more for walking to different things throughout the day that you guys are doing.
Yeah, and we were in Malibu for 30 years. We raised our kids in Malibu, and it was a great place. I mean, I don't want to. I mean, I loved being in Malibu, and I would not take it back. But I sort of outgrew Malibu, and one of the issues with a community like that is we had to get in our car to do anything. We had to drive to get anywhere. So we were on a hill. We had great views, but you go buy a cup of coffee, get a newspaper, go to the gym to work out, even to hike. You had to get in a car and drive to get there. The first year we were in Miami Beach, we didn't own a car. We walked everywhere, and we have 20 great restaurants within walking distance, and the beach is right out our back door. And my board rack is right there, so I don't even have to put my board on top of a rack and drive to a put-in place. Same with the bike. So everything about where we are in Miami is conducive to my lifestyle of being outside. And even though Malibu was, for example, I mean, I didn't mountain bike in Malibu because I was afraid to get on PCH, the Pacific Coast Highway, which is become crazy with traffic and just the dangers of just getting down the street to get to a trail sort of scared me off. Not that way in Miami. I'm right on the sand. I'm right on the beach. It's a quick hop to be immediately into a beautiful workout very quickly. So it was the perfect move for my wife and I to make when we did 3 years ago.
And coming back to the walking, I think that's often an underestimated form of movement and exercise. You know, you talk about some stats in the book about our hunter gatherers and how much walking they would have done in a day. And yeah, like there's the whole 10,000 step thing that a lot of people like to quote, and just having that as part of your day-to-day living situation just makes moving so much easier.
Yeah. So to that end, we did get a car, and we've had it for 2 years, and it has 3,800 miles on it. So like we use it to go back and forth from the airport and to if we go visit friends in a different town. But otherwise, we almost never drive during the day, and we're either walking on the beach or walking on the hard packed sand, which is one of the great joys for me, is either walking or sprinting at low tide on the sand, or walking to do our shopping and carrying bags home from doing grocery shopping. The downside to this was when I first got to our new place, I found I was walking between 5 and 8 miles a day, and I developed piriformis syndrome because I'd gone from no walking in Malibu. And I would drive to the gym, and then I would do a life cycle workout or a spin workout or something like that. And I'd hike once in a while, but for the most part, everything in Malibu was based on either driving or stand-up paddling, but I wasn't walking. And when I started walking 5 to 8 miles a day, I so overdeveloped my glutes and my piriformis that I had the first, I think, 3 months in, I developed sort of a sciatic problem, which went away completely, knock wood. But it was from that transition from not walking at all to walking a lot.
And how did you go about treating the piriformis?
I joined a group. There's a site online called ultimatediscpickup.com. And it's basically, it has all the ultimate games in the country where you can, if you're in a new town and you want to find an ultimate game, you just go on here and it gives you pinpoints location. So I joined the local Miami Beach Ultimate group, and the guy who was the commissioner happened also to do body work, and I told him about the piriformis, and so he started using Theragun and some roller protocols and some stretching protocols on me, and it took care of it within a couple of weeks. So it was a perfect example of treating what would be a pretty debilitating injury. I mean, sciatic pain. I would be in horrible pain when I would wake up in the morning, and it would take me an hour of warming up to where I could move without that pain. And understanding how the body works and understanding the kinesiology and the biomechanics. My friend August is his name. He was able to completely eradicate it.
Happy to hear that. And it hasn't come back since.
Has not come, again, it's been almost 3 years now and has not come back since. But some of it was I started to think like I was walking in deep sand. I was purposely walking in deep sand, thinking it was a good workout strategy for me. But because I hadn't worked around it, I hadn't worked the other muscles around it. That was probably one of the contributing factors. So I stopped walking in deep sand. And I could start up again, I guess, because now I've sort of worked my way into it. But I have so many things to do, so many things to choose to do. I mean, I wake up every day and it's like I'm at summer camp. It's like, okay, am I gonna swim today? Am I gonna paddle? Am I gonna e-foil? Am I gonna ride my bike on the beach? Am I gonna go to the gym? It's just such a great, for me, the perfect, I'm gonna say retirement lifestyle, although I'm not really retired. I just, I'm able to orchestrate my day so that I have a lot of time that I can spend outside.
That's great. I'm happy for you. And when you talked about walking through the deep sand, it got me thinking about barefoot movement. Is that something you're big into if you're doing sprints or going for walks on the beach? Are you into being barefoot to be more connected with the earth and
Totally,
yeah?
totally. But I think I've been a big fan of barefoot movement and minimalist shoes since day one. And I feel like people lose touch with the not just the earth, but the haptic sense of how their body moves when they wear cushioned shoes. I think the sort of the response to the minimalist shoe movement was this maximalist shoe movement, which has these thick rocker soles and it's horrible for the feet. It's like I think the worst thing you can do to your foot is to put it in a cast and then remove all haptic sense, all the senses that the sensory inputs that the foot gets from being barefoot. And for the longest time, I played ultimate in Vibram Five Fingers in those minimalist 5-fingered shoes, and I never rolled an ankle because I realized that even on a field with potholes in it, that as I was sprinting down the field, if I stepped on in a hole or landed on a tilted thing, before I transferred all my weight onto that foot, my brain already knew how to adjust the rest of my leg to absorb that shock or that roll. And every time I did that, every time I would run on an uneven surface that way, my feet got stronger and stronger. The small muscles of my feet became much stronger than they ever could have wearing cleats or even regular, what we might call tennis or running shoes. So I've been a huge fan of people going barefoot, and I to this day I just kind of roll my eyes when people say, "Well, I couldn't go barefoot, or I couldn't, wear a sort of minimalist shoes because I have no arches." Well, the reason you have no arches is because you've been supporting your arch with an artificial bridge your whole life, and so your arch has atrophied. It's given up the ghost. It said, "I don't need to work anymore." The only way to build arches, not the only way, but the best way is to walk barefoot as much as you can. So one of the ways to do that is to walk, in the shallow water, if it's warm water, on a coastal flat plain, or in deep sand is another way to do it. I do sprints barefoot. And even though I had an issue with my feet a couple of years ago where I actually tore my plantar plate doing sprints. And so I had to wear cleats just for the stiffness of the shoe, just to be able to get around on a Frisbee field. I didn't want to give up Frisbee, right? So I had to alter my footwear. But once the plantar plate repaired itself, I went back to doing sprints only in minimalist shoes because I want that haptic sense, and I want the feet. It's, as an aside, I ran from the age of like 14. I was a runner, and when I started running in probably 1967 or 68, there were not many shoes available, and the shoes that were available were very thin-soled shoes. And the effect of those thin-soled shoes was you couldn't run that many miles in a week because it was tough on the feet. It was tough on, you were limited in your mileage to the small muscles in your feet and their ability to recover from one day to the next from putting in miles. In the late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, the thickness of the shoes started to increase. And then Nike came up with these waffle trainers and these Nike LDVs, which were like almost an inch thick. And then New Balance came out with shoes. There were a number of shoe companies, Adidas and Pumas, and they all came out with thick-soled shoes. And the running boom took off, and people started putting in 80, 90, 100 miles a week, 120 miles a week. And the irony here is that because these shoes were cushioning the footfall and the small muscles of the feet ceased to become the limiting factor in injuries, and it bypassed that important haptic sense and put all of the pressure on the quads and the calves and the quads and the hamstrings and in many cases the glutes, and all the way up to the lower back. And so people started getting different kinds of injuries, but the same kind of injuries. So that the irony with these high-tech shoes is that the amount of injuries did not decrease over time. Just where the injury was got moved further up the leg, all because somebody thought it was a great idea to cushion the feet and cushion the footfall and kind of remove that natural ability that we have wired to us to adjust our stride to accommodate that sensory input.
And it seems like the running world in general is making a comeback towards the more minimalistic.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the lighter weight shoes, the minimalist shoe is now sort of a combination of lightweight, thinner sole, but also that sole now has some kinetic forces built into it. So the sole itself, if you were a great runner and you're landing on your midfoot, the way the sole is constructed now, it absorbs the energy and transfers it immediately to the next push off. So there's been discussion in the running shoe circles about whether that might even be an unfair advantage to people who are wearing those types of shoes. It's one of the shoes that was used to break 2 hours in the marathon recently. So it's now the recognition is that, yeah, you want to utilize as much of the foot as possible, and that works really well for an elite runner who's probably been running a lot barefoot to begin with and trained, the small muscles of their feet and trained their Achilles to be that spring-loaded action. Meanwhile, I think a lot of people are still who are what we call citizen runners or joggers or people who are maybe overweight trying to run to lose weight. They're still, I think, flocking toward that maximalist shoe because of the cushioning that it offers.
Right. So we talked about the big transition a few years ago, moving to Miami Beach. Another big transition in your life over the last number of years is becoming a grandfather. And I know this is something you're enjoying. So talk about what that change has been like for you.
I mean, it's spectacular. It's indescribable. And I've always figured I would love it, but I didn't, I never, until I actually got there, I never realized how awesome it is. So my granddaughter, her name is JJ, Jalen Jedi Wolf. She's a year and a half right now, and she's talking up a storm. And when I say talk up a storm, she knows a lot of words, and she's constructing 3-word sentences, and she's very communicative, and she's bright and funny and just great to interact with. So one of the downsides to being across the country is we don't get a chance to visit as often as we'd like to. But we go from Miami Beach to California, where my daughter and granddaughter are located, typically for 1 week a month. So it's not, it's a pretty good stretch of time that we are able to spend time with them.
That's quite a bit. Congrats to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So let's come back to fasting. And you talked about earlier, typically your day will be not eating till about 1:30 or 2. Let's talk about leading up to that. What time are you getting up? What different things do you consume in the morning? Are you having tea or coffee, or how does that morning routine look like?
Yeah, I am a big morning routine person. So I like to have, I like to go to bed within maybe a half hour to an hour window of the same time every night. And that might be, 10:30 or 11, probably not much later than 11. Usually get up around 7. So I try to have 8 to 8.5 hours sleep. If I get 9, I do not apologize for that. I'm a big fan of sleep and the restorative nature of sleep. When I get up, first thing I do is make a big cup of really strong coffee. I put whole cream in it and a tiny bit of sugar. and I set about to do I read a couple of papers in the more actual, real, physical newspapers. I just can't get into reading news on my phone. And try to figure out what's going on in the world and try to understand my role in it from what's going on in the news. And then I do a couple of puzzles. I do New York Times crossword puzzle. I do Sudokus and Ken-Kens and whatever, depending on what paper I'm reading and what part of the country I'm in. There's a lot of great puzzles. And so I don't ever spend more than, say, a half hour total on the puzzle part of it, but it's a kind of fun way for me to get my brain cranked up, first thing in the morning. Then I'll go do some work. I might write for a while. I might, answer emails, make some calls or whatever. Typically break around 10 or 10:30 and do my workout. If I'm in Miami, that might be a bike ride, again, on the beach. It might be a stand-up paddle session. Might be down in the gym. I'm very fortunate to have a great gym in our building. So it's awesome to just break, go down, do a 35-minute intense workout, stop, come back up and pick up where I left off. Work a little bit more, maybe have lunch typically around 1:30. I have my first meal. And then back to a little bit of work in the afternoon. Now, because I'm depending on what errands I have to run, maybe in the afternoon, I might do some walking there too. Then at my day, because of, again, how I've constructed my life right now, I do what I call fire and ice at the end of the day. So I'll do a 15-minute sauna. We have a spa in our building too. So I do a 15-minute sauna. And then I do anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes in a cold plunge, and just up to my neck in a cold plunge. And that's very sort of at the same time refreshing and relaxing to me. Leave the cold plunge, and now I try to play drums. I have a electronic drum kit in my apartment, in our condo in Miami. So I'm able to, I wear earbuds and I can put some music on an iPad. And then I have headphones, full-on headphones that I put over the earbuds where the drum sound comes in. So I can be rocking out to Metallica, or Green Day or Petty. And all you can hear is pitta, 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 pitta with the drum pad. So I'm not upsetting anybody or any of my neighbors or anyone else. It's a really cool thing. So I just decided I wanted to learn how to play drums as one of my sort of lifetime bucket list things. So I do that for an hour, and then my wife and I either cook dinner together or we go out to dinner, and then I will watch a little bit of TV. I think television has never been better in terms of its program offerings. It's TV show offerings. I guess you can't say program with TV anymore. And then go to bed. And it's a great lifestyle. I love it, and it's good routine, and I like to maintain that routine.
Sounds great. Yeah. I got a lot I want to get into within that. Let's talk about the fire and ice to start. So you have a sauna in the building. Is it an infrared sauna or a regular hot rock sauna?
Regular dry sauna, hot rock sauna. Yeah.
Nice. And then the cold plunge, is that something that's actually like built into the spa?
Yes. So the spa has men's and women's side, so they're separated. So when my wife does hers, we can't do it together, but they each have a jacuzzi, a sauna, a steam room, and a cold plunge. So it's really what I like the best about it. Don't tell anybody. Is that nobody uses it because it's such the cold plunge is such so foreign to most people, and the people who do use it go in for 2 seconds. They jump in and they immediately scramble out, and they can't believe they just did that. And so it's very available to me to go in there and spend some time in the plunge. There's all sorts of research on the benefits of these, both the hormetic response to heat, for instance. So a lot of people would say, well, why don't you just do, the heat by itself, and then do the plunge by itself on a different day. And there's a lot to be said for that. It's sort of on a side note, for instance, I don't think I would ever do a hard aerobic day with a hard lifting day. I mean, I want to separate those. I want the results of my aerobic day to stand alone and create the biochemical responses based on the signals that I produced to have the greatest effect on an aerobic day. And then if I'm in the gym and I'm lifting heavy on an anaerobic day, I don't want to mix those signals up. So I want to leave the body with just that, and to repair the tissue based just on those signals. And you might even argue that that's a similar concept with this fire and ice, that if you're going to be doing a sauna, why don't you just do the sauna one day, just do the heat, and let that be the signal that you're left with in terms of whatever the hormesis you're trying to create. And on another day, just do the cold for its anti-inflammatory effects and its other and its immunologic boosting effects. So that's a legitimate observation that you didn't even make. I predicted it, but it's interesting that I don't even do the plunge for the hormesis or for the anti-inflammatory effects as much as I do the plunge for the mind game that it is. I mean, just spending 4 or 5 minutes, sometimes more, in 48-degree water, trying to maintain breathing and not get freaked out and not get too cold that you overdo the hormetic effects of that. So I almost do it for the mind, the head game that it plays with me. And I started doing this years ago because when I grew up in Maine, I grew up in a small fishing village in Maine. I learned to swim in a saltwater pool that filled in with every high tide, and then emptied out. And so the water was always in the 50s. And it was horrible. I was a skinny little 10, 11, 12-year-old kid trying to learn how to swim at the YMCA. So I hated cold water my whole life. I hated it. After these swim lessons, I would shiver my ass off for like the whole day. When I had to retire from competition as a marathoner, and I elected to start training for triathlon, I had to learn how to swim again. And I learned in a public pool, which was 81 degrees. And I got to the point where I even hated getting into an 81-degree pool. It was like it was still 16 degrees colder than my body temperature. And so it wasn't until years later, when I'd long since retired from triathlons and long since retired from competition, and I just realized this is stupid. Like my aversion to cold water it's not serving me, and there's something there that I need to deal with. And so I started walking into my unheated pool in Malibu in the middle of winter. And so I'd go out at like 9 o'clock at night, and the pool temperature would be 52 or 46 or something like that. And I just walk in and stay as long as I could, and then get out. And typically I'd get out and get into a jacuzzi afterwards just to warm up. But that's kind of how I started doing this 10 years ago, just as kind of a mind game. And it became an interesting challenge to see, how long I could do it, and what thoughts were going through my head, and my, my breathing techniques. Did I need to breathe or not? And so that's kind of why I do it. It's like, for me, it's not about the supposed anti-inflammatory benefits or the brown fat benefits. It's more about just this sort of nice little space where I walk in, and the first thing I say is, it's not good or bad. It's just a sensation. And that can apply to a lot of things in life, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you mentioned the brown fat. I want to talk about that a little bit, because the ice bath or doing a cold shower can be so complementary to fasting, especially if somebody's goal fasting is to lose weight. So talk about that activation that you just brought up of the brown fat.
Yeah, so brown fat is just this mammalian adaptation. It's I guess if you're going to quantify or subjectify fat as good or bad, adipose fat, white fat, typically is non-metabolic tissue. It's just stored energy, brown fat is metabolically active and burns off energy. And so you literally want to activate as much brown fat as you can if you're somebody who wants to optimize health and optimize body composition, for example. And one of the ways to do this is to again, when any of these things that we do, that we undertake, that are seen as challenging or difficult or uncomfortable, we do because we're trying to prompt the change in the body. And in prompting a change in brown fat, we want to submerge ourselves in cold water, whether it's an ice bath or a cold plunge or a cold shower. And to the extent that we can do that, the response of the body is to say, okay, if this fool is going to do this on a regular basis, we better start generating more heat in the form of this sort of built-in heating device that we have in the form of brown fat.
Okay. And how long does somebody need to subject themselves to this cold water to get that brown fat benefit?
I mean, all of these things are relative to who you are, how old you are, male, female, how much body fat you have already, how much time you've spent in cold weather, with or without subjecting yourself to cold plunging. I mean, a lot of these things there's so many variables in here. So when you say how much time do you have to spend, I would say the most that you can stand, without making yourself horribly uncomfortable, would be a good way to do it. And over time, if you become adjusted, adapted, accustomed to a particular temperature, you either extend the amount of time you can do it, or you lower the temperature. With people who are taking a cold shower, again, depends on the part of the country you live in. If you live in the southern parts of the country, your cold shower is probably 68 degrees or 65 degrees. It might be in the 50s, but I doubt it would be much lower than that. If you're in the Northeast, your cold shower might be literally 38 degrees or 42 degrees. So these, you have to temper the amount of time with the amount of temperature that you have and the amount of discomfort that you're willing to endure. So there's no real rule of thumb here, I think. It's just basically you start with your own baseline and try to improve your exposure by either increasing the amount of time or decreasing the temperature.
Sounds a lot like fasting, where again, it's different depending on the person, and people need to build up a tolerance. And
absolutely, that's a great example, and I think that's how we do all things that we know are good for us, but tend to be uncomfortable. It's how you train for a 10K. You start out easy and you push the level of discomfort to the point where you're able to run faster and run longer. And as a side note there, I will tell people that my entire career as an endurance athlete was just about managing discomfort. Everything I did as a runner and then later as a triathlete, from cycling and running and swimming, was about putting myself in a position of uncomfortableness, of discomfort, by increasing the amount of work I was putting out, increasing my heart rate, increasing my breathing rate, and becoming uncomfortable doing it. And unlike a lot of other sports, games in particular, where you're having fun, you're playing football, it's fun, basketball is fun, hockey's fun, soccer's fun, baseball's fun. Running is not fun. I'm sorry. You might say it is. You might enjoy it. You might get a little bit of a buzz from it, and you might enjoy going out on a jog with your headphones on. But as an elite athlete, it's not fun. It's about managing discomfort. And the irony here is that, not the irony, the game here is that the day you line up at the starting line with 20 other guys who are equally as trained, equally as genetically gifted, equally as desirous of winning this race, on that particular day, what it comes down to is the one person who's willing to create such discomfort for himself that he drags other people into it and they become so uncomfortable that they fall by the wayside. And that's what endurance sports is all about. It's about managing discomfort. As a metaphor for life, it's an interesting concept. Managing discomfort can be a great asset in business. It can be, it can get people through hard times. I'm certain that over the last, year during COVID, there were a lot of business owners who managed a great deal of discomfort, others who gave up the ghost because they were unwilling to manage that discomfort. And those who managed it best are going to survive and probably thrive when we come out of the other end of this. On the other hand, in relationships, managing discomfort might be a bad strategy. You might want to identify what it is that's going on and deal with it, and not just manage the discomfort and not just hang in there. So it's I thought a lot about this concept of managing discomfort and how it serves us or not in different areas of life.
Very interesting stuff. And do you think, Mark, in your case, all those years being a runner, pushing through discomfort led to that transitioning over into your business success?
100%. 100%. I mean, business is difficult as it is. I have one of the first things I say to anybody who a young person starting a business, I said, look, if this were easy, everyone would be doing it. It's not easy. And perseverance is absolutely critical. You have to have a great business idea. Don't get me wrong. You can't just be, stupid thinking the widget that you invented for yourself is something everyone else is going to want. But if it is something that other people want, then perseverance is one of your greatest assets if you have that. And having been an endurance athlete served me extremely well. And I've had a number of minor successes and a lot of big failures in business. The cool thing about business is you only need one home run in your life to make everything you've done worth doing. It's really been an eye-opening experience to realize that where else in the world of sports can you have a season where you only had one win and that was enough to set you up for the rest of your life, right? So I think just managing the discomfort when it occurs. And by the way, there's a lot, like, business is fun and it's a game and there are amazing highs that you can get from being even marginally successful from one day to the next in your business. But over a course of a career or a lifetime, there's a lot of lows too, and you have to kind of persevere through those lows. But at the end of it, if you had, again, one good home run in business, you could be set up for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess you have to have that home run within a certain period of time to, like if you're waiting till you're 80 to have that home run, that's, could be a challenge to have all those failures over the years. And
let me tell you something, man. I basically was homeless when I met my wife. I had made a lot of money and already lost a lot. I was discouraged. I was trying a whole new approach. I was an actor and a coach and a personal trainer. And then I had some successes, and then I had some more failures. And my home run came when I was 65 years old. So, people would say, you might say, depending on how old you are, it depends on when that home run comes. My home run could have come at 27. It could have come at 35. It could have come at 48. It came at 65. Now, what I'm telling you is it made everything I did up to then worth doing. So it wasn't like I needed to have it happen in my 30s or 40s or 50s even. And I was successful enough that I could have eased back and not worked much more. But I kept thinking, there's a home run here somewhere, and I want to keep plugging away at it. And it was fun to do, and it was about persevering during those times. But but that's my message literally is, I mean, I tell my kids, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was 47, because I did so many things before that. And then I changed my mind again at 61. And then I finally, got my home run at 65. So everything I did, I would not repeat one. I would not take back. I would, one thing that I did, I wouldn't ask for a redo on any of that.
So you had your big home run in your mid 60s, but you did have a lot of base hits and singles, doubles, and triples along the way. I mean, you've done a lot of things, right?
Yeah. But again, let's define what a base hit is. I mean, for somebody who's got a regular job and is paying the bills, that's a double for a lot of people, right? So, everybody's base hit, everybody's double, everybody's triple has a different definition. And, you can't, I think it's important to not, compare yourself to other people. You can only compare yourself to yourself and what do you want from life? And do you want to focus on family and not so much on career? That's a totally legitimate strategy, right? And do you want to focus on just being fit and healthy and playing games, all the time and having an active lifestyle and not focus on career so much and not even focus on family? That's a legitimate strategy, a legitimate choice. It's ultimately what all we're talking about here. Like everything we're going to discuss today, Jesse, is about what makes you happy. It's about your happiness. And we started out by saying if having energy and not being sick and being healthy and being vibrant, if that makes you happy, I know how to do that. I know how to make, to help you do that. But if, staying at home and sitting on a sofa and playing video games and weighing 290 pounds, if that makes you happy, I'm not going to argue with that. If you're legitimately happy, dude, I mean, I sometimes would envy that ability, because I set, I sort of set standards for my happiness that I sometimes think, wow, that's just an artificial thing that I put out there and doesn't really need to be that high, but I chose it. So I guess I'm going for it.
Well, we talked about the grit from the running and how that translated into the business success. Another thing that popped into my head just now is the fact that you were working in the health and wellness realm and learning and sharing that information, which probably propelled you in your health, which probably added to that home run you eventually hit.
100%. I mean, these are, like I say, there are no coincidences here. These all, in retrospect, these random things all add up to like, oh my God, that's so perfect that it turned out that way. Like if I had understood much earlier about how much damage I was doing to my body by overtraining and my diet, and if I'd adjusted that, I would have had a longer athletic career. Now, what does that look like? I don't know. A lot of my friends who were top runners in the country in the 70s and 80s, and a lot of my friends who were top triathletes are now, they're not in a good way. There was never money to be made in those sports, and so a lot of them are, trying new things to make a living and maybe bypassed an extra 10 or 15 years of what could have been a career building opportunity to continue down this path of racing. And I love racing. I'm glad I did it, but I'm glad I retired when I retired. I could have been one of the top 5 triathletes in the world if I'd learned how to swim. I was certainly the best runner that ever transitioned over. I am so thankful to this day that I got injured and that I got sick and that I got tired of it and I couldn't do it anymore. I'm so thankful that I went on to find something else. As I started down this road of coaching other athletes, I realized that I didn't need to train that hard to be just as fit as they were. That was an aha moment for me. When I stopped eating a lot of carbohydrates and started recognizing that fats were good for me, and I didn't gain weight, it was like, oh my God, what an aha moment that was. I can achieve a lot of my fitness goals just by changing my diet around and not even working out as hard. That was great, and I wouldn't have come to that had I not, had irritable bowel syndrome and had to give up grains, basically to save my life. So all these things, in retrospect, make tremendous sense. They didn't at the time. It's like, oh, this isn't working. I've got to pivot. I've got to try something new. But in retrospect, it all lines up perfectly.
And to bring us all to the same page, in case anybody's wondering, your big home run was selling your business.
Yeah. So in 2014, I had this pivotal aha moment where I realized I was writing so much about food and what makes food taste great. Basically, if you've gotten rid of the sugars and the processed grains and the industrial seed oils, what makes foods taste great are the sauces, the dressings, the toppings, the methods of preparation, and nobody was making truly healthy sauces. And so I started a company called Primal Kitchen to make mayonnaise that you felt good about putting on your food and tasted great. To make ketchup that moms felt good about giving to their kids because it was completely unsweetened and tasted like all the ketchup that they were used to. Making salad dressings that the more you put on your salad, the better it tasted and perhaps the better it was for you. And this was kind of a new spin on sauces and dressings and food because we built the product first using the best possible ingredients, and then we priced it later. And some of these were relatively expensive, but we realized there were a lot of people who were waiting for this kind of company, this kind of product to come out there and be on the market. And I was fortunate to find a partner in Kraft Heinz. They bought us almost 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now. They purchased us because they recognized that we were onto something. We were changing the way the world looks at eating. We were leaders in that arena, and they also recognized that they wanted to play in that arena as well. So they purchased us with the full understanding that we were going to keep doing what we were doing and do it even better using their resources. And it's been great.
So was that a tough decision at the time when they offered to buy you out?
No, it wasn't a tough decision at all. I had already, from the beginning of starting the food company, I knew I was going to be acquired by a larger strategic company. And when Kraft, came to us with their offer, it was exactly the partner that I was looking for. Somebody that, because I realized that at my age, I wasn't going to have the wherewithal or the means to grow it for years and years into the future. And I wanted to find a large company that could take what we'd done and leverage it and build upon that. So it had always been my plan to find a strategic partner, and they came in at the right time.
And Kraft and Heinz aren't companies known to, get into the health and wellness space, to say the least. When you made that sale, were you concerned at all that the integrity would decline?
Never, because they bought us understanding that we knew what we were doing and that we were leaders in this field. So it would be, I need to come up with an analogy, and I won't right now, but I need for future reference, because it's, they weren't going to buy us and then ruin the very thing that they'd spent so much money acquiring. There was never a danger of them diluting the product with cheap ingredients. We were always based on the best possible ingredients. What they really have brought to us is a marketing budget that we didn't have, access to capital, growth capital, access to certain manufacturing places, manufacturing facilities that we didn't have access to, and ultimately access to distribution that we didn't have. So it was always my intention to have Primal Kitchen be the preeminent, better for you food company in the world, and I wasn't going to be able to do that on my own. And and it's been amazing to have Kraft Heinz as a partner.
So since you've partnered with them and you've let the reins off your baby a little bit, you've been happy with the way things have unraveled.
Oh yeah, I mean, we still have the same. They didn't want us to fire anyone, so we have the same management team. We've hired some new people, but same management team that we grew from scratch. We have the same production teams, the same. Everything is the same, except we have access to more resources from them. But nobody got fired. I had a 2-year consulting agreement with them that they just renewed for another 5 years. Our team has all renewed and stayed on. So it's, it's the best possibility for all of us, I think.
Happy to hear that. And Mark, I know I got to let you go soon, but I want to come back to the fasting and your protocol again a little bit before we part ways. And you mentioned the coffee you have. So up until that 1:32 p.m. when you break your fast, that one coffee is all you have?
Yeah, and that's, people, there are purists who would say, wait a minute, you broke the fast with, a little bit of heavy cream and the coffee. But I'm like, this isn't about so much the sanctity and the purity of the fast. It's about not eating real food, and the coffee. I can argue that the caffeine in the coffee is having its own sort of beneficial effects on fat metabolism, for instance, and that I'm accelerating any fat burning that I might have otherwise undertaken doing that. The one time I will say I do something differently is on certain leg days, maybe once every 10 days. If I'm going to do some heavy stuff that's going to really impact my joints, like hex bar squats or something like that, I will do 20 grams of collagen protein about 20 minutes before that workout. And so that's sort of breaking the fast in that regard. But again, I'm not. My motivation there is to provide raw materials for my tendons and ligaments and fascia to use to repair from the damage I'm about to do in the gym. And that, to me, has more benefit than one more day of a extended eating or not eating window. But otherwise, that's my routine is typically to have my first meal at 1:30.
Got it. And you mentioned sugar in the coffee. What kind of sugar, and why is that something you include?
What kind of? It's table sugar. I mean, the number of different sugars that I see on the market, whether they're organic or brown, packaged sugar or whatever. Sucrose is sucrose in my book, and it doesn't matter where it came from. It's the same chemical composition, whether it came from corn or beets or actual sugar cane. I mean, I will say, having said that, my wife keeps sugarcane sugar in the house, and it's organic and blah blah blah. But I don't really. It's that is so insignificant to me when you're talking about sucrose as a molecule, and to think that you can identify that it came from a raw material of, again, sugar beets or corn or whatever, kind of almost laughable, because it in the context of everything else I eat throughout the day, it's a tiny amount of sugar. But I like just the little bit of sweetness that it adds to the coffee, and I certainly could be using monk fruit or stevia or something like that. It's not, I don't need to. It's again, how do I feel? I feel great. So I'm not trying to live by specific numbers that I read out on my wearables. I'm trying to live by what makes me feel the best, what makes me feel satisfied, and what gives me the energy to start the day and be able to go long periods of time without eating if I need to, or if I'm forced to, or if I choose to. This is what we talked about from the beginning. It's the metabolic flexibility includes mental flexibility too.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it at that. The new book is 2 meals a day. Other than listeners getting a copy of that, how can they connect with you?
Mark's Daily Apple is my blog. Been writing every day on that since 2006. Primal Kitchen, primalkitchen.com to find out more about the foods. We have about 80 products now total. I shouldn't say new, 80 products in total. We're on Instagram with Primal Kitchen Foods, with Mark's Daily Apple as well. And I'm Mark Sisson Primal on Instagram. That should be sufficient.
All right, I'm going to link it all up in the show notes. Mark, I really appreciate your time. I had a lot of fun here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. Good to see you again.
You too. Take care.